All right, welcome back, Powers on Sports Podcast. It is now time. We are a mere couple of weeks away from the start of the college football season. All the anticipation, all the summer workouts, all the media days. We are almost to the action on the field, and we are here to give you your SEC and ACC preview tonight. We are going to be talking to two guys that are dialed into both those conferences, both in the state of Tennessee and the state of Georgia, but have many, many contacts and are very much dialed into all things SEC and ACC. Let's start with Vince Ferrara, 99.1 The Sports Animal in Knoxville, the morning show host, the 6 to 9 morning show. Mr. Ferrara, welcome in, sir.
Mr. Powers, I'm doing great. Always nice to be on with you and do radio with both of you fine professionals.
And we are going to get to your Tennessee Volunteers in a little bit. And Mr. Mike Grace, the host of the Press Box radio show based out of the Atlanta. They talk SEC football, ACC football, virtually 365 days a year. Shows on 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, pressboxradio.com. You can find the show on in 20 affiliates around the Southeast, Mississippi, Georgia, a little bit of Tennessee, and Alabama as well. Mr. Grace, welcome in, sir.
Thank you, man. Love being here, and great seeing Vince again. Who again, we're glad he's doing well these days. Absolutely.
And Mr. Grace is a Mississippi State guy.
Can
He's
you
wearing his
tell?
Mississippi State shirt. We probably won't talk a whole lot of Mississippi State tonight, but you never know.
Oh, shocking.
All right, let's get right to it. Let's get to the SEC. Before we get to the on the field stuff, I want to get your opinion. There's been a lot of chatter in the offseason about playoff automatic qualifiers. How many should the SEC get? The Big Ten get? There's been a lot of back and forth between Petiti and Greg Sankey. For you, Vince Ferrara, should the SEC and any conference should they be guaranteed spots? Or should they have a couple of spots maybe to the conference winner and then the next best couple of teams based on merit? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the automatic qualifiers. The SEC and the Big Ten have all the advantages. They have the two best conferences. You don't need anything guaranteed to you. In fact, Greg Sankey, you saw him kind of change his tune. He started to do it a little bit in Destin and saying, you guys assume that we wanted the automatic qualifiers. Hey, we would have had more teams in if we didn't have those limitations and automatic qualifiers going to other conferences that maybe wouldn't merit that as well. So I think it should just be top five conference champions and leave the other 11 wide open. And the best conferences are going to get the best teams, and that's it. There's obviously so many other factors involved with it and how the playoff, how they value the strength of schedule. That's something that they're trying to get. The Big Ten obviously looks at it much differently. They want to talk about all the play-in games and how that it expands the playoff even more, and it increases the inventory and all these other lame reasons why they say they should get the automatic qualifiers. That's all garbage. They just want to make sure the SEC doesn't get more than they do, or not shortchange themselves if maybe they do have a down year, because I think the Big Ten is more top heavy than the SEC. I think the SEC has more depth. This would be a year where you could see them cash in with a whole bunch, maybe the bottom part of those at larges, but not maybe not the as many national championship contenders. Whereas the Big Ten has several that are up there, but I think there's a drop off after that. So yeah, absolutely no automatic qualifiers in my opinion.
How about you, Mike Grace?
What he said, yeah, and all you have to really do is kind of look at the preseason polls right now. They are dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten. There's a handful of Big 12 teams in there, handful of ACC teams in there, but in both polls, Notre Dame, the one independent, Boise State, the one non-Power Four team that's in there. So I'm all for the 5-11 model. I want those five guys. Last year it was Arizona State, Clemson and SMU both got in from the ACC. I'm fine with that. The five champions are great, but the 11 at large should be decided again. As you say, Vince, what's that criteria going to be? Strength of schedule, strength of record. There's so many factors that are going into that. I think that's the bigger question mark. And as much as we want to know as college football fans, do any of us know what the discussions really are in that committee room? Ultimately, it comes down to a bunch of guys and gals in a room deciding the night before we make the announcement, the day of, I guess it is. So I'm all for 5'11". Let's just see what we can do to nail down the criteria as to what it takes to be in that top 12.
Because interesting, I think the Big Ten is kind of taking the position we're the big dog on the top of the mountain. They've won the title the last 2 years. There's some talk of are they, again, each of these two conferences has their own opinion. Obviously, we heard last year the ACC got a second team in with SMU getting in the mix, and they want a voice at the table. The Big 12 wants some additional, potential more than one potential team at the table. So I'm with you guys. I think the top five conference champions, and then let's take the next best 11 teams, whatever conferences those guys come from. Even give the Notre Dames and the Boise States an opportunity. Even the non-power fives, the Tulanes of the world, the those kind of guys. I think they deserve an opportunity too. So interesting how this will unfold here in the next 6 months or so as the TV contracts potentially get renegotiated and all that kind of good stuff. So, all right, let's get to on the field stuff. Let's start in the SEC. For the first time ever, which is hard to believe, the
Yeah.
Texas Longhorns preseason number one going into the college football season. Close race between them and Penn State. It was not unanimous by any means. Penn State was a close number two. Texas, a 2.5 or 3 point underdog on the road in week one as the number one team in the country as they play at Ohio State. Just give me your thoughts. In your view, again, only two out of the last 31 years, I believe I saw, has the number
Yeah.
one team, preseason number one, ended up winning the title. So the odds are not good for Texas. But do you think that's a fair assessment? Texas, Penn State as 1-2 in the country? You go, Mike.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you look at what the teams return, and I know there's a question mark with Arch Manning, but his name is Arch Manning, and there's a reason that again, you look at what he's surrounded by on both sides of the ball. Texas is, I won't say they've surpassed a Georgia or an Alabama at this point, but they're right there with them in the SEC. There's no doubt about that. And right now, they're the team of probably, again, we know more about than the other teams. So I'm perfectly fine with that. Penn State, again, they're there because of what they return. Ohio State was what number two in the coaches poll, but they
Right.
flip flopped in the AP. Look, I'm all for the Big Ten, and I think Ohio State and Michigan, again, having won the last two national championships, were the best teams in college football, especially playing at the end of the year, which is a big factor now when we play so many games beyond the standard 12 regular season games. But here's the thing. Let me see Indiana do it again. You did great last year, Indiana. That's great. Now go do it again. And that's what I'm waiting for there, because you get the Michigan and the Ohio State and occasionally Penn State, but name the other Big Ten powerhouse that's there every single year. I don't know who it is. Illinois might be the team this year.
Right.
There's some talk about that. But no, I'm perfectly fine with Texas and Penn State being there, and we'll see how the season plays out from there. I saw a great stat that, again, when you look at the entire top 25 and try to check their accuracy over the years, it's probably below 50%.
Yeah.
But when you narrow it down to the top 10, the preseason top 10 and the postseason top 10 are closer to 60 to 70% correct year in, year out. So again, you look at those top 10, and that's basically the teams that we know are going to be fighting for it in January.
And for me, Vince, even harder to make these kind of projections with so much movement in the transfer portal with the NIL and all the ability for players to move around. I mean, it's just a crapshoot. It's stuff for like you and us three to talk about in August on slow days. But how much credibility do you take in these early polls?
Well, I do think that a lot of these teams will be in the mix at the end. Some of them will not. Some of them will flame out, have a disappointing season, and then there will be a few that will rise up that we're not expecting. Some maybe from just outside the top 10 that move in there. Others from maybe the bottom part of the top 25, or maybe completely out of nowhere. But I'm fine with Texas at number one. The thing is I don't think there's a clear, like, we've gone into seasons where we feel like Georgia is the most complete team or Alabama is the most complete team. Maybe Ohio State, some years. I think everybody has enough questions
Yep.
that it is pretty open. But I think among the SEC teams, then yeah, Texas I think has the fewest. Yes, Arch Manning is a question. He's not a question to me. I'm completely confident in Arch Manning. I don't have to give him any sort of historical label of what he's going to be for me to feel confident that he's going to be a great college quarterback. And he has so much talent around him. And Steve Sarkisian has proven himself as a head coach that I think they're going to, and they don't have the most difficult schedule in the SEC. I know I've seen some metrics that say that Texas has got a difficult schedule. Not in the grand scheme of things, not compared to other SEC teams. Man, I'll break it down with you. They do not. Yeah. So, yes, they have Ohio State to start out the year, but it is overall, they've got some of the lesser teams in the league to kind of help them through, and they've got a ton of talent, the skill. Did lose one of their potential starting offensive linemen in camp for the year, but, man, they're deep. They're nasty on defense. Really good at the line of scrimmage, and I believe in Arch Manning. So I have no problem with Texas being number one. Real quick on Penn State. Penn State has a ton of talent too. Can they overcome James Franklin in the big moments? Right. That's my question about Penn State, not their roster, is James Franklin. That's kind of my hang up with Miami too. Miami has a better roster. They have a most proven quarterback they've had other than Cam Ward in a long time in Carson Beck, but I don't trust Mario Cristobal. Right. So there's certain teams that I think have to prove it with their head coaches in places in big moments, and Penn State is one of them.
Vince, I want to echo what you talked about there being no clear-cut best team out there. All you have to do is look at the random first-place votes in both the coaches and AP polls. We know Texas got the most. Penn State had the second most. Ohio State got a bunch. Georgia got a bunch. Maybe it's Clemson. Clemson got some first-place votes. They might be the best team in the country for 2025. I think there's that group in that top 5 or 6 with a handful of teams from the SEC, handful of teams from the Big Ten, and maybe 1 or 2 here. Yeah, I don't know the Big 12 contenders. So some folks have said Texas Tech. Can Houston be the surprise this year? Can they be this year's Indiana and maybe make it to the playoff? But I think you're right. There's just not a clear-cut number one team right now. It'll be fun to see how what I think is the most wide-open CFP we've maybe ever seen.
And I think it's good for the sport where there's so much uncertainty, and you never know where a team could, like Vince said, could be outside the top 25. You run off 6-7 games in a row, and all of a sudden you're in the top 5 in the country, and you're playing for a lot of marbles there in come November.
And you mentioned the portal earlier, Jason, wherein again a team can make a huge turnaround. It used to not be that case, but if you make the right moves and bring the right guys in and have the right formula, you can do a lot of good with the transfer portal. Although, and we've talked about a bunch on our show, Jason, is that you look back at the last couple of national champions, especially Ohio State and Michigan the last 2 years. Yes, they've had key positions that were filled by transfer, but the bulk of their roster, the bulk of their too deep depth chart are guys that started in the program and were developed through the program. So I think that's still the best way to do it. But yeah, you have to take advantage of the portal and fill those needs. And let's face it, the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Alabamas, they've got what it takes to fill those positions with the best players out there.
And to piggyback on what Mike said real quick on the portal, I know we got to move on, Jason, but the portal, these big programs can cherry pick guys to fill starting spots off of lower end Power 4 conference teams and then group of 5, and maybe even at times in the FCS. So they can go get the best and fill their spots. Here's the problem, is they lose greater volumes from their depth. True. And then those guys trickle down to those levels, and suddenly those players that were backups, they develop in the stars. And now really well-coached teams that maybe have a better path, now they have a star player that wasn't playing at a big school, takes away their depth, helps them with a starter. Now they rise up, and now they can do some special things. And maybe you get a couple on a team, and now you can really get something cooking. So that's where I think the portal has added more questions to the top of college football, and then throughout, because we don't know. Look at the SEC and how many new quarterbacks there are, how many portal additions. A lot of them on paper look like upgrades. Some of them are going to work out, some of them are not. It just adds to the unknown of it, and we're here to see it.
Who knows Zach Calzada is still an SEC quarterback?
Right.
He's been in this league for 10 years now and played 5 different teams. But that's what the portal does. Yeah.
I think he backed up Eli Manning.
You're right.
Speaking of quarterbacks. Sellers at South Carolina, Nussmeier at LSU, Arch at Texas, Lagway at Florida, Mateer coming into the league with now some controversy with him with some gambling allegations. For you, who's the best quarterback in the league before we snap a ball?
Hmm.
Pot-
Vince,
I mean,
I'll
again,
let you go first.
potential versus production, I get it, but who do you think, if they play really well, they can really be a massive difference maker for their team?
I'll jump in there. I'll say Garrett Nussmeier.
Yeah.
He is the guy to me. They have weapons on the outside too. They've improved in running the football. They do have a couple positions to replace on the offensive line, but they have talent there with some 5 stars. So I think it's Garrett Nussmeier. Look, these veteran quarterbacks are the ones that become special late in their careers, and though that's the kind of ingredient that you need to win national championships. Those are the ones, not the redshirt freshmen or the sophomores. The teams that have veteran quarterbacks are the ones that tend to win the national championship. And at LSU, yeah, they've got to be better on defense. So they're obviously have some questions, but man, that position, to me, he's the best of the bunch, and there is really good depth at quarterback in the SEC.
If you ask me which player is more valuable to their team, I'm going to go Lenora Sellers at South Carolina just because so much of their success is going to rely on him. Let's face it, Nussmeier surrounded by a much better supporting cast, we think, anyways. Arch Manning, we've already talked about Texas and everything they've got. Don't look, nobody's talking about Gunnar Stockton, okay? And we only had a small sample size a year ago, but this guy was a terrific high school quarterback, and I know there's a huge difference, but just don't undersell Gunnar Stockton. And with a receiving core that should be much better this year, that's a team that led the nation in drops last year, but they love their wide receiver core this year. I think, again, Gunnar Stockton, given the right time and given a running game, which Georgia hasn't really shown the last couple of seasons, if they can get that back, I think Gunnar Stockton could be the surprise of the season.
And maybe the wild card of all wild cards for both their team success and their coach's future could be DJ Lagway in Gainesville.
No doubt, yeah. And again, it's just about keeping him healthy. Can he stay healthy through a full season? Yeah.
And he is already banged up a little bit earlier in camp. I mean, look, we talked about him a little bit earlier, but I think Arch Manning is going to be among the best quarterbacks in this league. And then you mentioned it before. I know there's the whole gambling thing. I don't know what's going to come out of that. He says it was a joke or whatever. But from a talent standpoint, he was one of the highest rated quarterbacks in the portal.
Yep.
And Oklahoma got the highest rated quarterback and one of the highest rated quarterbacks and the highest rated running back in Jay Knott from Cal. So Mateer can run. He's a dual threat guy. I think he's a really good fit. Oh, by the way, they also have his coordinator.
They brought his OC with him.
Yep. Right. So that makes it a really good fit. So yeah, he's another one for sure that. And I think the Austin Simmons kid at Ole Miss is going to be really good. I think Jackson Arnold is in a much better place at Auburn. Hugh Freeze desperately needs a QB. I think Oklahoma gave up on Arnold way too early. I mean, they yanked him in the Tennessee game last year, and I know he's turning it over, but
he had nobody around him, Vince. He had nobody around him, yeah.
So many injuries at wide receivers. So it just kind of gets to that reminds us about the depth at quarterback in this league.
For what it's worth, John Mateer, Tim Brando on our show, Jason, picked Mateer to win the Heisman Trophy this year.
Oh, wow.
And for Oklahoma to be a sleeper in the CFP. So watch out for Mateer at Oklahoma.
See how much he has on his Venmo account on himself to win the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, that's a totally different story now.
How much he got his kind of his vacation year last year. How much heat's on Kalen DeBoer if he doesn't have a big year in Tuscaloosa?
I don't think it's that much. I mean, I really don't. And obviously, a disaster if they go 4-8 or something.
Yeah,
the Bama fans will be up in arms. But no, I don't think so. Look, so far, this guy doesn't appear to me to be in over his head at all. I think the guy's incredibly comfortable where he is. Look at the fact that very few people left that program. Don't tell me there weren't schools out there who would have loved to poach a couple of folks from that Alabama roster, okay? But for the bulk of them, they've stayed. He hasn't had to worry about teams or players being poached from his roster. So I think DeBoer's doing fine. You look at Ryan Grubb, he brings his real OC in as well with a brand new starting quarterback in Ty Simpson. But no, I don't think there's any real pressure. I think the pressure in the state of Alabama is down in Auburn with Hugh Freeze and his quarterback. That's a guy who he's got to find a way to win and get that team to a bowl game this year, and preferably a good bowl, not not one of the lower ranking ones. So,
How about you, Vince? Any issues with DeBoer? I mean, obviously following the legend, they always say you don't want to be the guy following him. You want to be the guy after the guy following him. So how do you think his fit in Tuscaloosa is gone now that he has a quarterback who hasn't played much? He's going with the veteran, big talented young kid behind him. I mean, how much leash does Ty Simpson get? Especially if they were to struggle at Florida State maybe and lose that game. I don't know if they're going to do that, but how much rope do you think a guy like Ty Simpson's going to get in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Ty Simpson going back into recruiting because it was Ty Simpson and Nico Iamaleava
Yeah.
that were being recruited by Tennessee, and Simpson is from the state of Tennessee. So it seemed like at one point they kind of veered towards Nico rather than Ty Simpson, and it's taken a minute for Simpson. There's been some ugly moments and some cleanup duty that's looked good. The fact that he basically won it in the spring, even though he wouldn't totally commit the board and wouldn't totally commit to it. And then certainly that's the way it's going to go down now. He's got talent, and I think he's going to have a better supporting cast. Second year under DeBoer should help them. Look, DeBoer admitted, and players too, that, they maybe got away with, some players got away with too much. Like DeBoer was so not anti, but the antithesis of Nick Saban. He was so different. He is loose with the media. He is looser as a player's type of coach. It was so different. I think guys maybe took advantage of that too much, and it seems like he has worked towards bringing it back. Now, that's suddenly now you're a player and you're looking at your head coach and he's making these big changes and he's doing it different in the second year than the first year. How do the players view that? I'll go back to SEC Media Days I think it was going into last year, and Clark Lee's up there in the big room. Might have seen you, you guys just before that, and I'm listening to Clark Lee, and he's talking about, we had to reassess, we had to change our strength and conditioning, we had to change this, we had to get in with it, NIL, had to do all these things differently. I'm like, okay, so the players are going to respect you now now that you're changing everything you originally believed in. It didn't matter. They had a really good quarterback, and they came together, so they overcame that. Point being, it can come together if you sort of reset after a first year. He's got a lot of talent. He's got his OC. I think he'll be fine. I don't think he'd be, like Mike said, he'd have to have a disaster record year, and that's not going to happen for him to really be in a hot seat. Excluding the fringe that are going to be over the top, not counting them, but no, Hugh Freeze is under much more pressure than Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion.
Give me a player or two for each of you guys, maybe that we're not talking about, whether it's a receiver, a running back. It can be a guy new to the league, a guy that you liked last year. Give me a player or two that maybe the average Joe fan's not going to know about, but boy, he has a chance to have a breakout year at his school. A kid like the kid from USC that's at Georgia, the receiver, whatever. But give me a player or two, Mike Grace, for you that, hey, man, I really like this kid. And boy, he is due for a breakout.
Well, one of the discussions on our show, Colin Lacey, who's one of us, he and I have very different thoughts on Joey Aguilar, who Vince can talk to us about as the Tennessee quarterback. This guy had a fantastic career at App State. I mean, he threw for almost 6,000 yards in 2 seasons, 50 some odd touchdowns. He did have a turnover issue and turned the ball over, through some interceptions in there as well. But I want to see how he does in Josh Heupel's offense. And first of all, can he win the job? Because it's not decided as of yet. I think he's certainly the front runner, and Vince can speak to this better than I can, because he's there right there in Knoxville and is closer to the program. But I just think the guy, people are sleeping on him. UCLA's loving what they are seeing from Nico out there, but could this somehow be a addition by subtraction for Tennessee? Vince, am I way off base, man?
No, he hasn't lit it on fire in camp. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, look, Hendon Hooker a couple of years ago in the battle with Joe Milton for the starting quarterback, Joe Milton won it based on what we saw in practice. Then Joe Milton got hurt in the Pitt game, and Hendon Hooker took over and ran with it. So some guys are just better game players than they are practice players. That was the case for Hendon Hooker. The different type of players. I'm not saying he's that, but he does have the experience. We've all thought he's going to be the starting quarterback. I think he will. It just hasn't been. It's just been kind of inconsistent for all of those guys overall. So yeah, there's nothing in camp that says, "Wow, look out, here's star in the making," but that doesn't mean your scenario can happen. He needs help at wide receiver. They've been so banged up at wide receiver. They're not very deep. Only 7 scholarship wide receivers, and all of them with experience have missed notable time in camp. So like your second team is throwing to walk-ons who they're not going to throw to during the regular season. So it's not, and they needed the reps and the chemistry anyway. So it hasn't been ideal for that passing game. So I probably wouldn't go that direction, but it is interesting because they still got a really good defense, and I think they're still going to really be able to run the ball as well. Just kind of unknown with that passing game.
Mike, give me a guy from one of the bottom tier teams in Mississippi State and Arkansas, Kentucky that could have a really good year. Maybe the quarterback from Arkansas back with
Taylor
year
Green.
2 with Petrino, a guy
Yeah.
that could win a game by himself and upset somebody here as we move through the season.
Taylor Green's definitely on that list because we've seen what he can do. I want to see what Blake Shapen can do in a Jeff Lebby offense at Mississippi State. They think they've gotten a better roster than they had a year ago. And we saw so little of Shapen before he was injured and knocked out last year. A guy who came to Mississippi State with some high expectations. I think they certainly expected him to play well in Jeff Lebby's offense. I want to see how he can do. And look, for State, come on, 6 wins for them. A bowl game for State would be a CFP trip. I mean, in essence, because that program is, and again, I say this with the logo on my chest here. The program's is about as down as it has been in my lifetime, and that's a while, guys. And that's especially when you look at what's going on the other side of the Magnolia State and what Lane Kiffin's been able to do at Ole Miss and having a top 10 program. What is it, 4 out of the last 5 years,
Right.
something like that. So I mean, with that going on in Oxford. Gosh, I'm hoping that Blake Shapen can have a decent season in Starkville and maybe start the turnaround for that program.
Of these 4 teams, give me the team that you think could come out and kind of be the sleeper team in the conference. Diego Pavia back at Vanderbilt, what Clark Lee did last year with beating some teams that he beat. Really good year. Mizzou, Texas A&M, year 2, Mike Elko. A lot of people think they high on them. Tennessee. I'm not going to put South Carolina in the sleeper department because a lot of people are talking about South Carolina. But of those 4, Vandy, A&M, Tennessee, Missouri. Give me one of those 4 in your view that could wreak havoc at the top of that league if things went right.
Hmm.
A&M maybe with Elko.
Yeah, folks love A&M. They certainly do. And is it Marcel Reed?
Yep, I believe,
quarterback
yep.
there that's got a chance. They love him. And Elko's a guy that, you know what? He just doesn't attract a whole lot of attention. But you ask insiders, and they'll tell you he's a heck of a football coach. And we know A&M's got a bit of an NIL budget, so I think they've got some players on that roster as well. So yeah, A&M might be the sleeper team. Is there another one that jumps out at you, Vince?
Well, Tennessee has potential, but I think maybe too many questions on the offensive side of the ball. I do think their offensive line is coming along pretty well. Good group of tight ends. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I'm not sure, though, if you don't have balance on offense, if you can be a CFP type of team, but their schedule is favorable. I think Tennessee, when I kind of went through game by game and ranked everybody's schedule in the SEC, I think Tennessee has the second easiest schedule in the league. Now, easiest,
Right.
relative to.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's others that have a more daunting schedule. Tennessee has 4 very difficult top 25 opponents on their schedule. They also play what you could look at as the bottom 4 teams in the league also. So yeah, there's plenty of games that they should win. I think Tennessee, Texas A&M, I think they'll be right there, very, very similar in their win range.
Oklahoma maybe with Mateer.
Yeah, Oklahoma's
people think-
another one.
And I'll throw one in there that just from a fan standpoint, having watched the SEC Netflix documentary Any Given Saturday, man, do I want Shane Beamer in South Carolina to have a successful season. That guy's an easy guy to pull for. Love the way he's built that program. I hope that they can maybe be a sleeper. They shocked some people last year, won 6 games in a row down the stretch. If they can avoid some land mines, they've got a tough schedule. There's no doubt about that. But I'd love to see South Carolina be a factor. Can they do it again? Can they recapture that magic they had in the second half of the season last year?
All right, last one.
what's
I'll get you
crazy?
out of here on the SEC. How many SEC teams get a bid come that first weekend in December?
We have to remember that it's 12 teams, not 16. We
correct.
talk
Right.
about the
Yes.
16-team format,
Yeah.
but the reality is still 12. I will say 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Three
Texas,
last year. They only got 3
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah,
Go
I would say
4?
Texas, Georgia, LSU, Alabama would
All
be
right.
the 4 that I would go with.
I'm the
Grace?
same way. I would be the same way. I would think that again, what happens with the ACC? Can they get 2 teams in like they did last year? That may be the factor right there. Can SMU make that run? Some other folks like NC State is maybe a dark horse in the ACC. Is there a second ACC team that can follow Clemson in there? If so, that might cost the AC or the SEC that 4th team. But I'll go with 4 too.
All right, so we got 4. So we gave you a good preview, guys, of the SEC. Again, check these guys out every day. 99.1 in Knoxville, Vince Ferrara, Mike Grace, Press Box Radio we talk SEC every single day of the year. We will take a quick break and we'll be back in just a minute with your ACC preview with Vince and Mike.